This evening to determine what he might have to say to the public coming up in just a few minutes here. He has promised to address the entire county here at about 6 o'clock. In the meantime, I wanted to give you some news of the day. Another person has been identified in the tragic disaster that was the Lahaina fire on August 8th. You're looking at Leroy Wagner, 69 years old, of Lahaina. Friends and family say he was a wonderful man. Lived in an area not far from where the fire originated, right off of Lahaina Luna Road, and his remains have now been both identified, family notified, and finally released to the public. That brings to 115 the number of people that have been confirmed fatalities in this. That doesn't, of course, include the people that they haven't been able to identify as of yet and may not have been recovered. There is that list, those lists perhaps is a better way to say it, of people that are still unaccounted for, and at last check we don't have the latest on that. So right now we are just getting ready to join the mayor. Let's go ahead and see if he's ready to talk to us here. Let's see what they're doing there, and we will go over there to that page and check that out. Stand by for the mayor's comments here.
Other places that are also interested in joining us.
So we are waiting for the mayor. He is supposed to be broadcasting to the entire county. Remarks here at 6 o'clock. They said that they were going to put it on their Facebook page. The county did, and so we are waiting for that. I'm not sure if there we go. It looks like he is up now, getting ready. So we'll go to that. 1 second, stand by here.
Five, four, three, two, one.
Aloha pumehana kako. There are no words that will ever adequately describe the tragedy and loss our families are experiencing in this crisis. Even as we offer comfort to those in need, Holy will follow a process to gain access. I want to share that we are working towards a return to Lahaina phase for residents and businesses to enter the restricted zone area just as soon as it is safe to do so. Your safety is first and foremost. We will be launching next week a website designed specifically to give daily information on how to re-enter the Lahaina town area. This will give residents and business owners the ability to visit their property. It will also have information on personal safety requirements. There have also been concerns about the oversight of the county's Emergency Management Agency. Following the resignation of Herman Andaya, we introduced the public to our interim administrator, Darryl Oliveira. He brings with him extensive experience as a former fire chief and former head of Hawaii Island's Emergency Management Agency. His time overseeing the response and recovery following catastrophic Hurricane Izelle's impact to Hawaii Island will serve Maui County well. Darryl started this week after relocating from Hilo. My team and I have been deeply and heavily focused on response decisions and activities. In the past 24 days, I have not spent time looking back in detail and instead have put energy on day-to-day needs and supporting evolving response efforts. But I do want to clear up misinformation and misunderstandings about what occurred in the early days of this disaster. There has been a heightened interest in what my team and I were involved in. Due to the impending weather report, we held a meeting in the EOC on Monday, August 7th, and it was decided by MEMA that we should go to partial activation starting at 9 p.m. that evening. 2 MEMA staff were staying at the EOC until the next day. I was alerted by Maui Emergency Management Agency staff in the early hours of Tuesday, August 8th, that a wildfire was occurring in the upcountry area. And I reported to the county's Emergency Operating Center at around 6:30 a.m. I was aware that Herman Andaya, who at the time served as the administrator of the county's Emergency Management Agency, was on Oahu attending a scheduled emergency management meeting or conference with officials of Haima. I was also aware that Herman was in touch with his staff who were in the county's Emergency Operating Center, and that a plans and operations officer within an incident command structure was present from MEMA. Members of my team were also present in the EOC. The early hours of the disaster unfolded with our emergency responders facing conditions that were made extraordinarily difficult with high wind, falling debris, including utility poles, and a rapidly advancing wildfire. Updates from our police and firefighters were provided by radios carried by personnel dispatched to the EOC from the police and fire departments. I and key members of my staff, the managing director, chief of staff, and chief of communications and public affairs, remained at the EOC, some until the next morning. The severe gravity of the impact was not clear in the initial hours, as our firefighters and police on the ground placed all of their efforts and actions toward helping people in the affected areas. As the evening of the first day came, the horrific effects of the wildfire in Lahaina became apparent. At that time, the degree and magnitude was still unknown as the situation unfolded. I had learned that there were many of our own emergency crews battling conditions and working to help our community in the midst of the crisis, who themselves had lost their homes, and prayed that their own families were safe. And those were individuals that were working in the EOC at the time, not in the field. I became aware of fatalities on the morning of August 9th, which I shared with the Lieutenant Governor's team. The realization that we had lost lives was devastating. There are no words that can adequately describe the depth of sadness and the shock of realizing lives had been lost. It was difficult to fathom the magnitude of the destruction at that time. On the evening of the fires on August 8th, I instructed our Corporation Council attorneys to complete an emergency proclamation, which I signed at around 8 p.m. that night. As we worked through the day at the Emergency Operating Center within the first 24 hours, I dispatched staff to assist in expediting the opening of emergency shelters at the Hannibal Tavares Community Center in Pukalani, the Lahaina Civic Center, which was later moved to the Maui Preparatory Academy due to the fire, the Kihei Community Center, which was later moved to Maui High School due to fire conditions, and at the War Memorial Gym in Wailuku. In the first 48 hours, members of my staff launched distribution hubs in West Maui, where an estimated 70,000 pounds of food, water, and supplies were brought in for immediate relief. That supplemented the tremendous work our community did on their own as well to immediately help where help was needed. Hundreds of volunteers stepped forward daily within the first 20 days of the disaster. Well over 3 million pounds of water, food, and supplies have reached the West Maui and upcountry impacted areas. Within 72 hours, the county began 2 days of delivering fuel to Lahaina until Ohana Fuels could reopen. While it could not meet the high demand for fuel, it was an immediate response that the county could provide. In the days that followed, and with the kindness of so many community-led efforts that came forward, support for those affected in both the upcountry and West Maui areas began to pour in. As of this week, the county, in partnership with Hawaii Food Service Alliance, mobilized and delivered 3 million pounds of food and supplies to those in need in the upcountry and West Maui areas. This effort, paired with an extraordinary community effort, provided much needed relief. Whether it came from an individual kindly offering a bag of groceries paid for with their own money or large-scale efforts, every donation has mattered. Community-led hubs that we saw springing up in neighborhoods, parks, businesses, and nonprofits across Maui came to life, giving relief and care to anyone and everyone in need. Our state and federal governments are providing tremendous amounts of support, and our local community, businesses, and organizations have been the soul of our dark days. Our council members, Tamara Palton and Yukile Sugimura, have been at the front lines of resources and support since day one. We have the unwavering support of President Biden and his cabinet, Governor Green and his cabinet, Lieutenant Governor Sylvia Luke, our congressional delegation, and our state legislators as we make our way to recovery. Our primary focus has been and will continue to be providing support and relief to those affected. What will come at a later time will be a thorough review of the disaster that the county will certainly cooperate with and be participating in. In the weeks ahead, and for the long journey we will face together, my team and I will do everything in our power to support the families who have lost loved ones and leverage all we can to bring support and help to our island. Many of you on the Lahaina side know my mom, Edna Nakora Bisson. She worked at the Pioneer Inn for 17 years with who became her second family. Uncle John Delatorre, Uncle Sam Puhala, Auntie Katie Nahina, Ardell Karpuiki, Joan Lake Farron, Auntie Harumi. Those were the people that we grew up with from Lahaina. Many of you know we are not from Lahaina, but our Kukahiko family is. We are not of the west side, but our Nakua Ohana is. And so we grieve along with you. As a son of Maui, with Ohana also affected by this tragedy, I want to assure you that we all champion our community's interests, our historical significance, and our cultural heritage. We will be tested as others try to divide us and even turn us against each other. However, we can be steadfast in working together, and in this time of onipa'a and lokahi, our strength is our care and our compassion for one another. So I say to you, let aloha kekahi guide us through this moment in our history as proud people of Maui. Mahalo.
So that is Mayor Richard Bisson addressing the island there, addressing the entire island regarding what happened with the Maui fire. And we did learn some things there. I don't think it was known, at least widely, that immediately preceding this fire, that there was in fact an emergency meeting that was one day earlier, which was sort of interesting because we know that Herman Andaya was off island on the day of the fire, the day that they predicted that this was going to be an event. There was a partial emergency mobilization, it sounded like, on the 7th for the 8th, according to the mayor. The mayor's remarks beyond that, going down, says that this is a new phase, that the cleanup is underway and will be going on in earnest in the Lahaina area soon, that there will be partial entries into some of the disaster areas. We have already sort of known that. That has been reported. The mayor did say he wanted to clear some things up, and I think the mayor might have been referencing some reporting that has been out there that early on he was not aware of who was in charge of the emergency operation on the day of the disaster. There has been reporting that the mayor was live on television in Oahu saying basically that things were under control even as the fire was raging. The mayor said that essentially Andaya and his staff were in charge of that, and there were people at the emergency management center here in Wailuku. So that is sort of how the mayor tells it. There are still a ton of questions, quite frankly, there about how this developed, and the mayor says there'll be time for that, but no less, the community may not want to be that patient, given that this has proven to be a very fire-prone area. We've had fires all summer long. 5 years ago, the fire after Hurricane Lane just about took out Lahaina, and still here we are on August 8th. So the desire to put off a searching probe of what happened here may or may not satiate the public. To that extent, many questions remain, including, who was in charge of the police, how many police officers were there, where were they exactly, how were they communicating with fire department, how many fire trucks were responding, were there fire trucks down on Front Street, was there communication on Front Street after it was known that there was no cell phones, no way to get messages out there, what were officials doing early on in the process, meaning, at 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon to get people out of the area. What were they telling people at that time versus later on when it was just too late, 5, 6 o'clock in the evening, and there are, according to witnesses anyway, explosions going off, and Front Street was lost at about or around that time. Lots of questions remain about that. A lot of questions have surfaced about where police were directing traffic, for example. Now, the police chief has said that basically has stood up for his officers, saying that they were not directing traffic into the improper areas, into hazardous areas. There have been certainly differing accounts publicly reported and reported by Maui Alert that may not have been the case. So many questions yet to be answered, and frankly, the public will have to decide whether they want those questions to be put on the back burner, essentially, as the mayor was suggesting there, as rightfully the island decides to work and focus on recovery here and getting things back to at least somewhat of an operational stability on the west side. But at what cost? Is it worth putting all that to the side, all of those questions to the side, just so we can focus on the myopic task of taking care of the, getting back to normal routine on the west side? Those are the questions that certainly we can't answer, but the public is going to have to grapple with. And I can tell you that while the mayor may be asking to put those questions to the side for the moment, many in the community just won't. Reporters, investigators, lawyers, all kinds of people are looking into this already, and we already know that the county has been itself involved in litigation suing the electric company, which the court of law, in a sense, is the ultimate arbiter of answers. So those are the highlights there from the mayor's office. The mayor also did talk about how he responded very quickly and overwhelmingly, is getting a lot of support from the governor's office, which he appreciates, and the president's as well, President Joe Biden also offering his support. So the mayor thanking those two entities for that sort of assistance here on the island, and making sure to point out that the recovery effort and the response following the fire led by his office has been extensive, has been lightning fast and thorough, according to the mayor. So those are the points that certainly he wants to get across. And by and large, at least from what we can observe, people seem to, under a very bad circumstance, be satisfied with the level of response services that they're getting for help. Hundreds of people being put up in hotels and vacation rental, Airbnb sort of situations, and getting food, shelter, clothing, all those things, and in pretty nice circumstances while they're getting it. Obviously, none of this is good. Nobody wants to be where they're at. Nobody's suggesting that, but also not hearing that there's any real discontent with the way the mayor and his office has handled the response in that way. So certainly the mayor is quick to point those things out as well as the community takes a look further into this. The further we get away from the event itself, the more focused some of the questions can be as the fog of the situation sort of lifts, and we have to ask ourselves, what were we as a community and the people that we put in leadership doing to make sure that this did not happen? And was it adequate? Were some of the norms that we have accepted as a community norms that frankly allowed this to happen? Some of the things that we may have taken for granted as okay, even though the guidelines might tell us otherwise, were those things ignored and a disaster resulted? Those are hard questions that we are going to have to look ourselves in the eye for, because of course, the community puts these leaders into office and the community holds those leaders accountable. So we all, to a certain extent, we'll have to ask ourselves some questions here. So that's it for now. From Maui Alert News Center, we appreciate you watching. We will update you on this story and all the stories affecting the disastrous situation, catastrophe in Lahaina, the tragic situation that has claimed at least 115 lives. Leroy Wagner being the latest to be on that list. Let's see if we can get his picture up one more time. This is Leroy Wagner, folks. He was declared to be on the fatality list today. His family has been notified. Our heart breaks for everybody that loved Leroy and anyone else that was involved in this very tragic and heart-wrenching situation. I'm going to sign off, folks. Appreciate you watching Maui Alert. Remember MauiAlert.com and Maui Alert for all your live breaking local news. We are your source for live video daily news here on the island. And